Yo, let's do a quick video on inherited cancer syndromes, super high yield for the USMLE exams. So we'll talk about FAP or familial adenomatous polyposis, Peutz-Jeghers, and Lynch syndrome. And then we'll be talking about MEN1, MEN2A, MEN2B. We'll talk about VHL, Wilms tumor. We'll talk about BRCA1 and 2, Li-Fraumeni syndrome, NF1, NF2, retinoblastoma, tuberous sclerosis, and lastly, xeroderma pigmentosum or XP. So starting off with, let's talk about FAP, familial adenomatous polyposis. So this is when there are adenomatous polyps, usually in the hundreds. And again, it's a polypotic disease. So it has polyposis, which is a lot of polyps. It always involves the rectum. So that's why we start with colonoscopy at age 10 to 12 and also perform prophylactic proctocolectomy. So that means you include removing the rectum. This can be associated with a syndrome that also has osteomas, dental involvement, and fibromatosis, a lot of derm findings, and that's called Gardner syndrome. And then there's also a variant of FAP that also is associated with metastatic brain cancers, such as medulloblastoma and glioblastoma, and that's Turcotte syndrome. And the way you can remember that is that Turcotte kind of sounds like turban, so and a turban you wear on your head. So the version of FAP associated with metastatic brain carcinomas is the Turcotte syndrome. FAP is an autosomal dominant condition because it affects the APC gene on the 5q chromosome. Here's an image of a proctocolectomy of a patient with FAP, and you can see that there are innumerable polyps that are removed. All right, next we have another syndrome with polyposis, and that's Peutz-Jeghers disease. And in Peutz-Jeghers, there are hamartomas in the GI tract along with pigmented macules. That's really the pathognomonic finding, the pigmented macules around the lips, oral mucosa, face, and the palms. There's increased risk of colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, stomach cancer, and breast cancer with Peutz-Jeghers. And then there's also a high risk for anemia due to bleeding from the hamartomas. It's associated with the STK11 gene, so the STK11 gene, and it's autosomal dominant. So that also helps you remember. One good way to remember what gene is involved is that you eat steak with your mouth, and you can have a rare steak. So you can remember that there can be bleeding involved. If it's a super rare steak, you eat with your mouth. So there are those pigmented macules, and it's the STK11 gene, autosomal dominant again. You want to contrast this with HHT, which is hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia, also called Osler-Weber-Rendau syndrome, and that's when there are those blanchable papules on the lips that are actually blood vessels. So this will also be associated with bleeding, HHT, because you'll have those thin-walled blood vessels and a lot of arterial vascular malformations. And then the last syndrome is familial juvenile polyposis coli. So this is when a similar version of Peutz-Jeghers but presents earlier in childhood, again with these hamartomas. This does not have any pigmented macules. Next, let's talk about some non-polypotic inherited cancer syndromes. So Lynch syndrome is associated with early onset colorectal cancer without polyposis. So you don't have the numerous polyps in the colon like you did with FAP. Lynch syndrome, this is very high yield, is due to microsatellite instability. And Lynch syndrome is associated with CEO. So these are the organ systems affected, which is the colon, endometrial, and epithelial ovarian cancer. There are other systems involved, but these are the most high yield that are tested. Treatment for Lynch syndrome involves routine scope, and then prophylactic colectomy is not recommended. This is due to an autosomal dominant. It's a DNA mismatch repair defect in MSH2 and MLH1. So this is super high yield, and again, this is a microsatellite instability defect. Now, another super high yield topic is general colon cancer risks. So that will include age, adenomatous polyps, so villus are more risk than tubular polyps, family history of colon cancer, IBD, especially ulcerative colitis, more so than Crohn's disease. So you'll start screening 8 years after diagnosis for ulcerative colitis for cancer. And then diet as well. So a high fat, low fiber diet is increased risk. And on labs, you may see anemia, and you want to test for a CEA because a CEA is a good metric for treatment response and can also be used to measure reoccurrence. and then a fecal occult blood test might be positive. The definitive diagnosis will be a colonoscopy with biopsy, and treatment obviously will be resection with sentinel lymph node biopsy, and then you'll do routine scopes every 1 year for 3 years and CEA levels. And here is the image of the tubular versus villus polyp. Next, let's talk about the adenoma carcinoma sequence. And this describes the progression of a colonic adenoma to carcinoma. And you'll want to know the mutations that are associated with this. So the first thing that happens is you have a loss of the tumor suppressor gene, APC. So this is a loss of a tumor suppressor. Do you remember which disorder was associated with the loss of APC? So that, again, yeah, that's right. That was FAP. So you can remember that because FAP is associated with APC gene. Good. So there's loss of the tumor suppressor gene, APC. So then you get a hyperproliferative epithelium. So this is a hyperproliferation of the normal epithelium because you have a loss of cellular adhesion and you have increased cellular proliferation. Next, you'll have a mutation in the KRAS gene, which leads to, and this is a gain of function mutation, which leads to unregulated cellular signaling and cellular proliferation. And that'll lead to the formation then from the hyperplastic polyp or the hyperproliferative epithelium to an actual adenoma here. And then you have loss of tumor suppressor genes, DCC and P53. And P53 is associated with, loss of P53 is associated with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And this results in transformation of malignant from an adenoma to a malignant carcinoma. So this is really high yield to know because they often like to go after this adenoma carcinoma sequence, and there's a good acronym, which is AK53. And that stands for APC gene, and then to KRAS gene, and then the P53 gene. All right, very good. So next, we will talk about some endocrine inherited cancer syndromes. So the first one you want to think about is MEN1, or multiple endocrine neoplasia 1. And that's associated with the 3 Ps: parathyroid, pituitary, and pancreatic tumors. So some parathyroid tumors you may see are parathyroid adenoma, parathyroid hyperplasia, which can be associated with hypercalcemia. Pituitary tumors include prolactinoma, and you can see bitemporal hemanopsia in these patients. And then pancreatic tumors include gastrinomas like Zollinger-Ellison syndrome or VIPomas, which will be associated with your WDHA syndrome, which is watery diarrhea, hypochloremia, and acidosis. All right, and these are associated with your Ps. So MEN1 involves a mutation in the MEN1 gene, and is an autosomal dominant mutation, and it's associated with your Ps, your 3 Ps: pituitary, parathyroid, and pancreas. Now, MEN2, on the other hand, these patients have an increased risk for medullary thyroid cancer and pheochromocytoma. This is super high yield, super incredibly high yield. I can't stress that enough. And this is one way examiners like to test this is they'll give you a patient that has a strong family history of a medullary thyroid cancer, and then they'll ask, what next step do you want to do before this patient gets surgery? So one option will be surgery on the exam, but the correct answer will actually be to obtain urine metanephrines because you want to screen for a pheochromocytoma. MEN2 is associated with the mutation in the RET gene, RET, and again, it's autosomal dominant. So there are 2 different subtypes of MEN2. So you can remember MEN2 has 2 subtypes: MEN2A, which is associated with medullary thyroid cancer, pheochromocytoma, and parathyroid hyperplasia, and then MEN2B, which is associated with your medullary thyroid cancer, pheochromocytoma, but also mucosal neuroma, and the big separating factor is the marfanoid habitus. So that can be a giveaway for MEN2B. So here on the left, you can see, this is from Airplane. You can see this gentleman is sweating, is pretty diaphoretic, and that's something you can see with the paroxysmal agitation and diaphoresis that can be seen in pheochromocytoma. Next, we have some renal involvement. So the main one you want to think about is VHL, von Hippel-Lindau disease, and this is associated with excessive angiogenesis. And this might be getting into the weeds a little bit, but VHL gene is associated with HIF1 alpha, and HIF1 alpha stands for hypoxia-inducible factor 1. So when you have hypoxia, then that will stimulate vascular growth because you want to stimulate blood flow to that area. But in the VHL, you have mutation in the HIF1 alpha pathway. So there's excessive activation of HIF1 alpha, and you just have excessive angiogenesis. So thus, knowing that this is associated with all these blood vessels, you have the following clinical constellation, and you can remember it with the acronym HARP, H-A-R-P, which is hemangioblastoma, which involves the cerebellum and retinum, angiomatosis, bilateral renal cell carcinoma, and pheochromocytoma. And that's associated with the VHL gene on chromosome 3p. And again, it's due to uninhibited HIF1 alpha, and this is another autosomal dominant gene. Here you can see an example of hemangioblastoma in the cerebellum, and here is an example of renal cell carcinoma. Again, the most common subtype is clear cell renal cell carcinoma. Another inherited cancer syndrome is Wilms tumor. So this is, again, an early childhood tumor. It'll typically be unilateral. You want to contrast that from neuroblastoma, which can cross the midline, whereas Wilms tumor typically does not cross the midline. Wilms tumor is from glomerular cells, usually the PCT, and the gene mutations are WT1 and WT2. So Wilms tumor 1, Wilms tumor 2, and that's on chromosome 11. And for some reason, the examiners do like to go after which chromosome is involved in the mutation sometimes. There are a couple different specific syndromes associated with Wilms tumor. One of these includes Wager syndrome, W-A-G-R, which stands for Wilms tumor, aniridia, which is lack of irises, and GU malformations, and then intellectual disability. And then Denny-Drash syndrome is associated with dysgenesis of the gonads. Again, that starts with a D. Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome is associated with Wilms tumor, macroglossia, organomegaly, and hemihypertrophy. And one of the things that Beckwith-Wiedemann will often present with will be an infant that they'll have slight hemihypertrophy, but the main one they'll give you is a large tongue and also hypoglycemia. So then you want to think about getting a renal ultrasound, because you want to be thinking about Wilms tumor and Beckwith-Wiedemann. Of course, the immediate management will be administration of glucose if they're hypoglycemic. Here is a CT image of a Wilms tumor. Now we're going to move on to breast. So the main inherited cancer syndrome for breast is BRCA 1 and 2, and in BRCA involves the breast, epithelial, ovarian, and pancreatic systems. BRCA is autosomal dominant, and it's associated with dsDNA breaks and a defect in homologous recombination. And if you remember back to your real early preclinical phase, or if you're studying for step 1, you probably are more familiar, but your homologous recombination is what you use for those double-stranded DNA breaks. So treatment of BRCA 1 and 2 involves genetic counseling, and then you want to consider prophylactic mastectomy and bilateral salpingine oophorectomy after childbirth. And that's because these patients have a high risk of ovarian cancer and fallopian tube cancers. So we typically recommend prophylactic removal of those. And then you want to do an annual screen with transvaginal ultrasound and CA-125. Additionally, in these patients, it's high yield to know that BRCA2 is associated with an increased risk of breast cancer in men. All right, now the next syndrome that we'll talk about is Li-Fraumeni syndrome. I know I just brought it up a little bit earlier in reference to P53, but now we'll officially talk about it. So the clinical constellation of Li-Fraumeni syndrome can be remembered with the acronym SBLA, which stands for sarcoma, breast cancer, leukemia, and adrenal gland tumor. And this is associated with a loss of P53, which normally acts as a tumor suppressor gene. So now you have a lack of G1 to S phase cell cycle regulation, and this is another autosomal dominant gene. Now for inherited cancer syndromes, the first one we want to talk about is NF1, neurofibromatosis type 1. This is associated with cutaneous neurofibromas, gliomas, cafe-au-lait spots, Lynch nodules, and scoliosis throughout medical school. It's really important to think about this. So this is also associated with pheochromocytoma and is due to a mutation in the NF1 suppressor gene on chromosome 17. This is also autosomal dominant. Here you can see an example of cutaneous neurofibromas. Here this is actual what cafe-au-lait is. It's a drink. Here are the Lynch nodules that you can see in the eyes. And now we can talk about NF2 or neurofibromatosis type 2. So this will present with bilateral schwannomas, cataracts, multiple meningiomas, and ependymoma. This again is extremely high yield. I can't stress enough how high yield NF1 and NF2 are. Again, this will also be associated with cafe au lait spots, and it's less commonly associated with neurofibromas. This is also one of the most high yield points of NF2 is that it can present with bilateral hearing loss. And when these patients present with bilateral hearing loss, you want to get an MRI because you want to be looking for a schwannoma. And this is a mutation in the NF2 suppressor gene. It's on chromosome 22, so you can remember that. I just remember that NF1, so I remember that so the NF1, I take the 1, it looks like a 1 here, and then I take the F and I flip it upside down, or I flip it backwards, and it looks like a 7. So that's F back, in the reverse. That's on chromosome 17. So that's how I remember that. And NF2 is just chromosome 22. So you can kind of remember it that way. Good. So now here's an MRI of an acoustic schwannoma at the cerebellopontine angle. And here is an example of multiple meningiomas. All right, now part 2 of our inherited cancer syndromes of neuro. So we have retinoblastoma. This is very high yield, especially for pediatrics, and will present with a white reflex, also known as leukocoria, in infants. So that's why we screen all infants with the eye exam. This is part of the standard newborn exam, and it can be sporadic or hereditary. In retinoblastoma, it's very high yield to know there's an increased risk for osteosarcoma, and it's a mutation in the RB1 gene, so the retinoblastoma gene. So the normal function of the RB1 gene is to inhibit E2F to block the transition between G1 to the S phase. So here's an example of leukocoria. And now the last one we have on this slide is tuberous sclerosis. The way I remember tuberous sclerosis is that there's essentially an overgrowth of normal tissue, which is also known as hamartomas, in basically every organ system. So the most common initial presentation for tuberous sclerosis is actually seizures, and that's due to subepididymal nodules, which are hamartomas of the ventricles, which can cause hydrocephalus. It's also associated with angiofibromas, which are cutaneous, ash leaf spots, another cutaneous finding, cardiac rhabdomyoma, which is an overgrowth of normal cardiac tissue, renal angiomyolipoma, which is the overgrowth of normal renal tissue, and Sjagren patches, which are actually plaques. It's a mutation in TSC1 or TSC2, which code for the hamartin and tuberin proteins, respectively. And again, it's autosomal dominant, but also as often as variable expression. Here you can see some angiofibromas of the face. Here's an ash leaf spot. Here's the cardiac rhabdomyoma. And then lastly, we have skin. So the main inherited cancer syndrome for skin is XP, xeroderma pigmentosum. And this is associated with sunlight sensitivity, more freckled skin, and corneal ulcers. And it's due to a nucleotide excision repair defect. So these patients are unable to repair pyrimidine dimers in response to UV exposure. And that's mostly, you want to think about the thymine dimers. And this is actually autosomal recessive. So here's an example you can see of a patient with XP, and there's the camp night down, where these patients with XP will have a camp at night where they're not exposed to sunlight. So here's a review slide. I went through a lot of work when I made this back in med school. I just figured I would share it with you. So it's got all the different organ systems: colon, endocrine, renal, breast, neuro, and skin, and all of the syndromes that we talked about and how they present, and also the mnemonic I used to remember them. So I really appreciate you guys listening, and have a good one. Peace.